guest, and it is our pleasure to be joined by Chris Biderman. Follow him on Twitter at that name, Chris Biderman. You can check out his Candlestick Chronicles podcast, Talking Niners, and he joins us now. Chris, how are you, sir?
I'm outstanding. How are you guys?
Oh, that's great.
No complaints. I mean, yeah. Let me just ask you a personal question.
Uh-oh.
When you cover a team, do you enjoy it way more when they're good, or do you kind of like it when they're bad, or do you want something in between? How does it go covering a team when they're this damn good?
From a business perspective, I think them being good is generally better for business because there's more interest and more eyeballs and more opportunities to maybe keep business going later in the season, if you catch my drift. But like my thing with the Niners right now too is, as good as they are, they're so good that it's not boring, but there can be elements of sometimes teams are just so good that there isn't really many interesting things to talk about. But I do think the Niners are so good that it is interesting because you can talk about them, relative to the 1994 team, which was obviously a historically good team, even for the Niners, who are a legacy franchise in the NFL. So it's, from that standpoint, like I do think them being good is great for us and great for content. Them being this in particular, just putting, historical streaks and Christian McCaffrey's touchdown streaks, and then, Brock Purdy ascending really from out of nowhere to playing at, one of the highest levels in the NFL when it comes to quarterback play. So, yeah, I would say the 49ers right now are great for business and great for all of us making content.
Chris, what challenges do you think that this week could present for the Niners going against a really good Browns defense? And also, I mean, we're just checking the weather every day. It seems like it's going to be pretty nasty weather heading into that game. What kind of challenges do you think the Browns and the weather could potentially cause the Niners?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a human nature element at play, right? Like the 49ers, and you talked to them after the game, they were so locked in and focused during practice all week for that Cowboys game in particular. You do wonder if there's ever an element of maybe having a letdown game. Maybe that factors in Sunday in Cleveland. I would have said, before Sunday's game, like Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett back-to-back weeks, it's going to be really tough for Colton McKivitz. But the way Kyle Shanahan threw so many different looks at Micah Parsons, with Myles Garrett coming, obviously they're different players, but they're similarly effective. It just gives you a whole lot more confidence that they're going to be able to deal with that edge rush in a way that maybe you wouldn't have been able to predict before Sunday's game. Because, look, like Colton McKivitz, first time starting full-time at right tackle, not somebody you would think is going to shut down one of the premier edge rushers in the game, but the 49ers did so many different things to Micah Parsons that really just sort of kept his head spinning throughout the game, and he was clearly frustrated. That maybe that does give you more confidence that they're going to neutralize Myles Garrett a little bit, and that's probably going to be a huge part of their game plan. But yeah, the weather can obviously be sloppy if there is a knock on Brock Purdy physically, and George Kittle mentioned it after the game, is his hands are kind of small for a quarterback, and that might have been a reason why he went in the 7th round. I'm not saying it was the reason, but maybe a reason. And maybe, when you get conditions and wet footballs and things like that, maybe that impacts it. But no, I think the 49ers have to be feeling really good about where they're at. And if they maintain the level of intensity they had in their preparation going into the Dallas game, they should be in a pretty good spot going into Cleveland.
Zachariah, Chris Watkins, Sactown Sports 1140. It's a pleasure to be joined by Chris Biderman. Follow him on Twitter at that name and check out his Candlestick Chronicles podcast. Chris, I guess when you have a team this good, you get questions like this. And my question is, if the Niners do not win the Super Bowl, and I know we're looking way down the line, but if they do not, and it has nothing to do with injuries, do you think the offense or the defense will be more responsible for them not winning it?
Oh, that's a good question. You remember in 2019 that it was really both sides in the fourth quarter. It was sort of a full team collapse. Mm-hmm. It was, allowing Patrick Mahomes to convert that long third down to Tyreek Hill with a coverage bust. It was, the offense not being able to move the ball and pick up first downs, and Jimmy Garoppolo obviously missing Emmanuel Sanders for what could have been a game-winning touchdown. So, it's really hard for me to pick just one. The 49ers are, have top five offenses, top five offense and defense right now. So, they're clicking on both sides of the ball and playing at a really high level and are super balanced. So it's hard for me to pick one, but I would guess typically how Super Bowls go is, you get a superhuman performance from an elite quarterback. So if they did get there and they did play the Chiefs, I think it's more likely that, Patrick Mahomes would carve them up in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl than the offense completely fall off, because they do have so many weapons offensively. So I would say, it's probably more likely that they run into a superhuman quarterback performance, a historic one, than have the offense that have their own offense just sort of falter down the stretch. So if you had to ask, I would say, I guess the defense might be more to blame in a scenario like that. But like you said, it's so far out that it's pretty difficult to say.
Chris, this question is coming from somebody who just had their favorite player, Justin Jefferson, hit the IR for the next coming weeks. Do you feel like the 49ers have a suitable amount of depth, or I guess fail safes with, if Debo goes down, Ayuk is someone who's ready to step up, Juwan Jennings, Ray McLeod. Do you feel like they have suitable depth to withstand a couple injuries to some key players?
Yeah, that to me is, I think, one of the biggest underlying silver linings, I guess, for it to getting Christian McCaffrey, right? Because, you say, the 49ers have an embarrassment of riches. There's only one football to go around, blah, blah, blah. But if they do lose one of their guys, then you're not really going to see as much of a drop-off as you would if you didn't have somebody like Christian McCaffrey, right?
Right.
Like, Debo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey do a lot of the same things. So if you are missing one of those guys, there's not going to be quite the drop-off as there would be if you didn't have CMC. Even, Brandon Ayuk missing the week 3 game, you didn't really feel it all that much. And even with George Kittle having a quiet first 4 games of the season, and then teams obviously, focusing their efforts on McCaffrey and the receivers, then that allows Kittle to get favorable matchups. And then he has a 3-touchdown game on national TV against, one of the best defenses in the league. So I would say, yeah, absolutely. Like the 49ers, part of the reason why they've been willing to invest in so many different weapons offensively is it does give them that depth to where if they were to lose one guy, it wouldn't completely kill them. And, they do have depth. Like Juwan Jennings is proven to be a good player. I think Ronnie Bell in an expanded role could be potentially a productive guy. You saw Jordan Mason have a really nice game Sunday night in the second half. So, yeah, I think overall when you look at the 49ers offense, it can absolutely withstand any injuries if they need to.
I'm like Santa Claus. I'm making a list and I'm checking it twice. And I got to ask you, you can tell me what you agree with or disagree with. I think in terms of teams that the Niners should actually fear, I've got the Chiefs, I've got the Dolphins, I've got the Eagles. Then I have a pesky list, which is Seahawks, Lions, and Rams. What would you do in terms of talking about teams that you think could put an actual scare in the Niners? Where would you go with that?
I would add Buffalo. I think, obviously they've had injuries on the defensive side, but you remember in 2020, the game in Arizona when the 49ers were forced to play there during the pandemic, Josh Allen just really carved them up, right? And I think that game sort of influenced Kyle Shanahan to go make the investment in trying to get Trey Lance and trying to get sort of an elite quarterback because of the way Josh Allen just had answers for everything they were doing against them. And obviously that 2020 Niners team at that point in the year was dramatically different than where they are now. But I think, if there's one way to beat the 49ers, in my opinion right now, it's with a quarterback that can do a little bit of everything. It's somebody who can make plays with his legs, somebody who has a big arm, who can make explosive throws downfield. And Josh Allen still represents that to me. And like I said, I know the Bills have injuries defensively and obviously didn't look great Sunday against Jacksonville over in London, but I would absolutely add them to that mix of teams if they were to get there, just because when you have a quarterback that dynamic, that can be enough of a factor even against an elite defense to potentially win you a game. So I would still pick the 49ers against the Bills, but in terms of all the teams you mentioned, I would absolutely add Buffalo to that list.
Chris, what do you think adding Randy Gregory does to for this pass rush?
Yeah, it gives them more depth. I mean, you saw Drake Jackson leave the game momentarily, and I think it was late in the second quarter on Sunday, and now you just have another guy who has the potential to be an impact player. And it's for the 49ers when the trade first happened, I was wondering, how much of the salary are they picking up, because it doesn't seem like them to make a big investment in a guy who's had as many issues as he's had, whether injury wise or away from the field, dealing with suspensions and stuff like that. But to see how much Denver's picking up the vast majority of his salary, it's really a low risk proposition for the Rams to add him. But you look at that pass rush with Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead, and even Drake Jackson, when he's playing well, can be an effective player for them. But you add somebody with the potential to be a first round type talent on the other side for relatively cheap. I mean, that's what happens when you're a really good team. You're able to attract players who just want to go to ideal situations where they could potentially get paid the following year. And I think that's what Randy Gregory's camp did. They looked at it and said, like, this is an ideal situation for our guy to come in and be productive and be part of a winning program with arguably the best defensive line coach in the NFL. So yeah, I mean, if he comes in and provides something similar to what D4 did in 2019 when he was, I know D4 dealt with hamstring injuries and wasn't as available as the 49ers would have liked, but when he was in there, they were really lights out in terms of pass rush. So I think there's a possibility that he could add that, and even if he doesn't, it's the 49ers still have a great pass rush. So I think it's a hard to lose in that situation as long as Gregory's a upstanding citizen and quality teammate and all of those things.
Chris Biderman, follow him on Twitter at that name. Check out the Candlestick Chronicles podcast. Before you go, can you name me the quarterback for the Niners when the Bills put it on them 34-24 in at Levi's? Can you tell me who the quarterback for the Niners was?
In 2020?
Yeah.
Was that CJ Beathard?
Nick Mullins.
Nick Mullins. Okay. Yeah, one of the two. I knew it wasn't Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you for the time, Chris. Appreciate you.
No problem, Zach. Thanks a lot, guys.
There you go.
Bye, Chris.
Yeah. I was talking about Josh Allen. He was 32 of 40 for 375 yards and 4 TDs.
I've heard, just like Chris mentioned there, I have heard that is the game that literally sparked the interest in them getting a guy like Trey Lance. I mean, that game really opened the mind of Kyle Shanahan to, if I had someone like that who can run, who can throw the ball wherever,
yeah.
My offense is, I mean, and then you throw in my offense to that, like that's a cheat code. And that was the day that, the beginning of the end, as some could call it.
Hey, Nick Mullins had 3 TDs, 316 yards, 2 interceptions though. Brandon Ayuk, 5 catches, 95 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, I don't remember that beatdown. 34-24. That's pretty sound. Niners were 5-7 after that game. Bills 9-3. All right, coming up next, the NBA offseason. It is the gift that keeps on giving, and there is one guy, disgruntled guy, but showed up to camp guy, because I think he doesn't want to lose his money guy.